and welcome as it slowly starts to trickle out for everybody who's here hanging out and waiting with us. Hopefully, you guys had a wonderful week without us. Chris, um, you've been doing something epic this weekend. Do you want to give everybody a quick update on what that was, and then we're gonna talk some Final Fantasy 16 drama.
I went and ran my first 10K race as part of a Olympic triathlon relay. So I had two family members. One was a collegiate swimmer, and the other is an avid amateur cyclist. That's what he does with all of his free time when he's not at work, is he bikes. And they needed a third, so I flew out there and through a buddy pass because I have a family member that's an airline pilot. So I went out there and standby flew out there, and I had hoped that maybe I'd be down around like an hour 10, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I finished at 57:26, so way under my goal. So that's like a 9:15 mile.
Yeah, that's incredible.
2 miles. Yeah. So way
like
under
to
pace.
Maintain that. Yeah.
It was not even numbered miles. So like the first mile, I thought I'll do like an 11.
Yeah.
We'll cross mile 3 around like, and I'll try to speed it up just a touch. We'll cross mile 3 around like 33 minutes.
Yeah.
And then see where I'm at. And that was my race plan. And the first mile, my watch dinged and said, that was a 9. And I'm like, okay, you gotta slow it down. That's too fast.
Yeah.
Burn
yourself
my mile
out
speeds
quick.
got slower and then faster. And so my fastest mile was the 6th mile at an 8:50. I feel great.
Yeah. You got some interesting colored hair there.
I do. June 20th, I have to chop my hair off because I landed a new gig. All the previous gig work and anything I've done on the side, in addition to streaming and content creation, like all of that has not cared what I look like, but this one does. And it's an incredible opportunity, way more important to me than my hair. So I was like, I'll cut it off.
Yeah,
but then I was kind of bummed. I was like, well, I don't want to lose my hair. So I'd always wanted to kind of dye my hair, and I never had like the courage to do it. I was like, well, what if I don't like it?
Right,
I realized,
exactly.
no, you have it for 3 more weeks. It goes away regardless. So I went ahead and my wife bleached it. Last week I sent out update photos on Twitter, and then she dyed it. And that night it was like one shade of purple, and now it's got like all these different colors.
Yeah, it looks good, dude. It looks good. Like, you're absolutely right.
So,
like when in Rome, why not make the opportunity? We talked about that a lot in college. We're like
$60
in college is like, I don't, no one really cares what I look like as soon as I leave. And it's like, there's going to be some kind of like standards that it's like, you got to hit. It's like, might as well grow out the beard now, or might as well like grow out the hair or color it or whatnot. So
it's
good
great.
on you, man. Good
on
you.
I got compliments in the airport. I got compliments when I was running.
Yeah.
People said, I really like your hair a lot. So I got a lot of, it was really well received. You get a lot of looks from generally like either older or more conservative dressed people, right? People who have, they spent their whole life dressing appropriately.
Yeah.
And I'm walking around with purple hair. But it's been overwhelmingly positive. Anybody that's been negative has typically been like, I can see your reflection showing there, because it usually comes with some level of comment that you're like, oh, tell me how you really feel about the world. People have been very vocal. I will tell you that it has caused that unanimously.
Yeah.
The level of vocal has been crazy, because people have told me, whoa, I didn't need to know that about you. Thank you.
That's funny. Yeah. How about you give everybody kind of a rundown of what's on the schedule for this week?
So I had hoped to get a P9 S clear, but that was before I knew that the patch was going to fall the same week as the try, and that I was going to be flying standby. So I lost 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
I did not get that clear, but I did make it to, I got to see what will be the Party Finder wall, which felt really great. And I feel really confident up to that point. Like, I feel like I understand why the wall works the way it does. I feel like I can basically call the mechanics as they show up. So I feel really good about the fight. I'll keep progressing. It's a long tier. You have this tier for basically like a year. We have it until like March,
a year
at the earliest. It could be later. We don't have
it's sooner. If it's March, that like you won some kind of prize, kid. Like, you buy a lot of
it could easily be May.
There'd
be nothing wrong with it being May.
I would not be surprised if it's like May. And the thing though is that I think when they announce the expansion, regardless, they're gonna announce it spring 2024.
Like, super vague.
Yeah, super vague.
Mile wide.
Not May 2024. Super vague. And then that way, if it comes in at May,
there's still a 1% chance we get a 0.6.
Yeah, you think so? You think they're
1%.
gonna?
I'll throw it a 1. I'll throw a
Give
1
it a
in
1.
there.
What are the odds? Like what are the odds here? Can we start? Can we start actually making bets?
1.
I don't need Gil.
There will never be one. But there's
I could use a back rub.
1%. 1%.
1%. All right.
Yeah, it'd be great. So I'd like to. So actually today, like I didn't get to play in New World last week, and there was stuff going on. I didn't play in Guild Wars the week before. There was stuff going on, and so I've been so focused on 14. It's like, well, I'm gonna play other stuff. And so having been like a standby flight last week, and then last night was like a delayed flight with the world's single most obnoxious passenger sitting behind me, and my suitcase broke while I was walking with it.
I apologize for being obnoxious to you on that flight.
She was outrageous. She was talking very loudly about all the wonderful things she does for other people to the person that was sitting next to her, who clearly did not know her before this flight and obviously wanted to know this.
Have you ever found that?
I know you're talking about how great you are. It has made you objectively the worst person. I mean, we're so high in the air. You're the worst person within a mile of me.
Yeah. Have you ever, and you were flying with Hitler, and that was
so rough.
Have you ever found like somebody who's particularly skilled or whatever doesn't need to tell people about that thing? Like if I was the world's best plumber, like I don't think I would have the desire to be like, I really have a good plumber. Like, have you worked with a plumber before? No, you haven't, because you haven't actually really met one.
Depends on why they do it, right? Like if they only do it to be the best and they don't actually give a crap about plumbing, yeah, they probably still talk about it. Because if they're not getting accolades, then what?
I'm only here. Plumbing. I'm only here for the accolades. Yeah.
So,
that's funny.
She was just outrageous, and because of the delay, like it ended up being a really late flight, and they shut the lights out, and she turned on her reading lamp to like continue to talk to the lady who never said anything back, just sat there and
just took it. She gets on the plane and she's like, turns out I was flying.
That's where she was from. The lady sitting next to her is like, she's like, I'm from Nigeria, and she said it with a super thick accent. I was like, she may not even understand all the words you're shouting at her. Like she's here on this flight.
Just needs somebody to talk at,
Very cool. I knew some stuff about Nigeria, and then she just went on this whole, and it's like, yes, this is getting better. You're obnoxious.
That's awesome.
And she's putting stuff in and out of the back of my seat, so the whole time.
Yeah.
Just stop.
There's nothing I don't think you need to be jumping in on New World. They got like some different kind of events. And you're not gonna go check out the PTR, but I tell you, season 2 looking even better. Like
I'm gonna play some D4 today.
Yeah, play Diablo is what to spend.
I haven't touched it,
dude. You're gonna have so much fun.
I have a pre-purchase on my account. I have not touched it.
You're gonna have some fun. I'm looking forward to jumping in also with some Diablo. So I already got you a pre-invite to the clan. If anybody out there is playing Diablo and wants to jump in with us, like be sure to be a part of the Discord. We're having a really good time. We're actually going to talk about. I think maybe we'll actually stagger that, because like being that you haven't had hands on, let's plan to talk about that like on Friday. Because like tomorrow Julie's got me needing to do some honeydew errands during my lunch break, so. That's going to be, I think we push to Friday, as long as you don't have any conflicts. And then, then we can kind of talk about Diablo 4, like the week that was. The changes on the PTR, like, are beautiful. Like, and I'm looking forward to letting you kind of see and witness those changes when season 2 drops sometime early July. They say July 6th. We don't know yet. We'll when it comes to dates and with anything with Amazon, that seems to be constantly in flux. We've already seen them push Blue Protocol to early 2024, Throne of Liberty. Like we're going to get a lot of news this week. So coming up this week, Chris is playing Diablo and jumping back into Final Fantasy 14. This week kicks off Summer Games Fest. We do know that the Xbox conference, the Final Fantasy 16 conference, is going to be this Sunday. So if you're free, I know I'm going to be hanging out, live stream, reacting to it, hanging out with who knows? We'll see if we can play it by ear. We haven't got to do one of those in a while, but. And that's really kind of what's coming up.
WWDC starts this week too.
WWDC, yeah. Oh yeah, the Apple event. They got some big
today, right?
Some big announcements coming out. Yeah, who knows? So lots of
rumors
stuff.
They could be getting into VR.
There's been rumors for a long time that they're getting into VR, and that's actually it'll be one of the most interesting things, because you see everybody else kind of like VR. Meanwhile, Apple's like, all right, we'll let them be public about it. We'll tinker around with it here in the back end. I hope it's a hybrid VR AR, because that would be, I think that you and I think that's probably the future, because I don't know, maybe the immersive crowd really wants something more. But anyway, that's what's coming up. Let's dive into the Final Fantasy 16 stuff. We got a comment section and more, since and we'll update the title of this, since we're not going to necessarily focus on Diablo. The preview, I'm having a blast. Druid level 25 ish, and it runs great on my Steam Deck. I've been playing it primarily on the Steam Deck, but I was able to play and stream some this past weekend. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. We've got Final Fantasy 16, Chris. This is one of the games that I am absolutely the most excited for, and it is in the release month that it comes out, June 22nd. Because of the legend of Fido, who's hanging out in chat with us, and many others, I have a PS5 and I'm going to be playing it. However, if you go out beyond the fandom and you go into the internet realm for a single player game, this game is already stirring up an insane amount of both people, defending it, fervently, and attacking it fervently for a wide range of reasons. And so, I'd like to get your perspective. I want to talk to you about the drama. Is that there's a couple of things that people are hitting the game for, which I think there is a valid level of criticism when you're talking about the game only coming to PS5, where people are like, oh man, I'd love to play it, but I don't have a PS5. I wish it was on PC. Valid. I agree with that. I agree with that take 100%.
Like third-party exclusives. So even if I had a PS5, I don't feel good about that.
Right.
I just don't like them as a concept.
Right. But now you take that, you level the console war right on top of it, and it's fuel for rooting for the game to fail, right? It's fuel for this sucks, Yoshi P sucks. This should be a turn-based game, and we've seen big figureheads like Jez, who works and writes for Windows Central, talking about how nobody asked for Final Fantasy May Cry, which is the riff on the fact that the Devil May Cry combat director is on top of this, and that's why. And so there was a rumor report that the pre-orders for Final Fantasy 16 are lower than expected. So I'm going to just give you that bit of information, and then I'm going to let you riff, because then I got more, thoughts to kind of add on to that. This is Square Enix. Everything that they ever announce has
Tears
been...
of the Kingdom set a Guinness World Record that was previously held by them for 10 million units sold in the first 3 days. They already had the record. It was like Mario Odyssey or something. So they took it from themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume Square Enix was like, we're going to do 11 million. I assume they just had no basis in reality, because the bean counters over at Square Enix, for many good reasons, are disconnected from the people who actually make games. And that does a lot of good things for us gamers. We don't want those two being closer together. But what it does mean is the projections are always bad. They're always bad. It's like, well, we sold a record number. That was really disappointing. Every time. It's ridiculous. They're like, I can't, and I think they get that because they look at Nintendo, and Nintendo sold Breath of the Wild faster than there were Switches. At one point, Nintendo had more Breath of the Wild copies sold than there were Switches made. And they're like, well, we should be able to do that. Okay, but you guys only make a game every once in a while in a non-cohesive universe across a variety of genre and style types. Sometimes it's turn-based, sometimes it's not. You don't have a cohesive fan base that's ready to blindly... The next Zelda game, they could offer pre-orders right now, Ashes of Creation style. 500. They could Star Citizen. They could be $1,000 a piece, and they would sell copies to the next one, because we know what it's going to be. Because Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom feels like an iteration on the same game.
Yeah,
that's not what 16 is. It's unrelated to 15. It'll be unrelated to 17. It's a whole different game. So I don't.
You make the reasonable argument, right? You're making the Final Fantasy fan who's like, yeah, every Final Fantasy game should be its own thing, and that brings into question the concept of well, are they really numbered? And turns out that a lot of the media reported on Yoshi P thing, and yeah, we might get rid of the numbers, and that. Then you actually go look what he said. He's like, no, he said that we had a discussion about it. And then they're like, oh, running with it. Yoshi P thinking about dropping numbers. It's like, oh, oh man, people just hanging on any little crumb to get any kind of headline out there. But each founder, flounder in chat, says they didn't pre-order Tears of the Kingdom, bought it on release day. That in and of itself is exactly right, with Captainer Tyler saying the pre-order is dumb because the same thing happens with God of War in 2018. They reported that, oh no, not looking good. Pre-orders aren't good. we live in a world of like no scarcity, right? To the point where like some companies are like, how can we make this digital scarcity, called an NFT? And thank goodness, like Square Enix, at least into some avenues, hasn't embraced that. And I haven't seen their the protected avenues actually like release. They talked about it. Anyway, like we don't need to rehash that.
2 weeks ago. I knew
Yeah.
I wanted to play D4 on launch. I pre-ordered it this morning, the day I was ready to install.
Yeah.
What benefit do I have for giving them my money sooner? I still got all the pre-order bonuses,
Right,
because I did it before. There's 6 hours and 16 minutes until those go away.
there you go.
Like, it's fine. Yeah. It's fine.
You had the opportunity to look at reviews. You had the opportunity to talk and see friends and play, and your risk
is. If a storm had hit and my computer had been ruined from water damage, I wouldn't have bought the game, but not because anything the Diablo devs did. Like,
yeah.
So like, why park any risk with them? They don't give me anything extra. It has a lower interest rate than my checking account, which is already insulting.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't. I don't understand when they're like, well, you didn't pre-order it 18 years in advance. Well, what do I get? Well, you get it at the same price as launch day. Why would I give you the money?
Right. Same thing. That's the same concept with the Ashes. It's like, I think the pre-order kind of game ends up hurting the expectations, right? Like there's a real conversation we can have about price. You and I've kind of hashed it out. Price, no matter what, despite the fact that we pay less for games today, like in terms of inflation and how all that functions, it still has this mindset of setting this arbitrary, like, oh, it's because it's $70, I expect even more. And it's these expectations that gamers have that tend to run afoul of the game itself. But beyond $70, we all know that game prices drop. And so honestly, I think more or less when somebody's like really like mad about the price of a game being $70, even if it's in a beloved, franchise that they trust, etc., like at some point, like you got to have a level of personal responsibility when it comes to your money and your expectations, especially when it comes to a game that is, like that outside of Nintendo, Tears of the Kingdom ain't gonna get any cheaper. But outside of that exception, like we know that these games' prices are going to drop, and so you just have to learn to kind of say, like, all right, if I'm concerned about it, maybe I'm not going to like that combat system. Maybe I'm not going to feel the M rating. I mean, like maybe I want to play this around my kids or something like that. Well, play the demo, right? Like, and before you pre-order, there is a demo that is like it's the worst kept secret. I don't know if Yoshi P said he was releasing a demo, but he did. I think it's the 11th, like that it's coming out. Good.
He wanted people to go hands on.
Yeah, and so to be able to experience it for yourself and then make it a financial decision. Yeah, like that's what I was saying. Like I think he did, but I didn't want to like mischaracterize it and be like, oh yeah, Yoshi P said this, and it's like then I'm just doing exactly what everybody else in the online reporting space.
I don't understand. I'm also seeing people getting really upset that it's not the game they wanted, as if that insults others. I understand that we don't get Final Fantasy games annually, but since they're not sequential, like I don't feel as hurt from Final Fantasy 16 sequentially as I would like a bad Star Wars movie. That's canon. A bad Marvel movie, that's canon.
Yeah.
And so like a bad DC movie, that's a fourth take on the origin story. And so like I can see being upset about like, how do I rationalize this with the other ones? But the Final Fantasies aren't that way. They are totally freestanding things. And they're known to jump genres. So it's not like a Zelda game comes out and it's still Zelda and it's still Link and it's still Ganon, but now it's turn-based. That would be a big change. And there have been other uses of the Zelda IP, but a core Zelda game has always been relatively on formula. That's not true of Final Fantasy. For as long as there have been Final Fantasy games, they have messed with combat system. They have messed with game length. They have messed with storytelling methods. So even when we see characters jump from one game to another, it's not always portrayed the same way. So there's not like a universal set of rules. It's not like they're operating on the same planet or the same time frame. So like I just
they need to be free. They need to be free to be able to experiment. One of the things that I was growing frustrated with some of the arguments, it's not a turn-based combat system. Like turn-based isn't the defining factor of what makes it a Final Fantasy game.
Complaint? Because we've known that for
a long time. Yeah. Like, well, now again, like it's like anybody's looking kind of for fuel to take their angle. And there's a couple of things that I think are at play. We've seen this kind of happen. It's like where people are overly negative about something for that attention because negative,
Things
viewpoints
must be getting better, man.
I think honestly,
things must be getting better. COVID must have blown by because the other day I saw people getting mad at Chick-fil-A about some change to policy on their website from 2015, and I was like, if the worst thing you can dig up is from 2015, we are doing all right.
We're
doing
making it.
Well, don't Google Texas
you're
right now.
So
we have more recent things, but everybody else is doing great.
We are actively looking for something to be mad at. I tweeted out, I was like, man, imagine if I had the time to be pissed about like nothing that really matters.
A tweet of somebody 6,500 tweets ago. I have a link to it because you're not going to be able to find it because it's quite a bit of digging. But wait till you hear.
Just wait. Oh my gosh. So I think there's that aspect of it. Like to kind of, build off it. It says here, the only reason they pre-ordered was because they wanted the collector's edition. I'm right there with you. I stated when Yoshi P took over Final Fantasy 11 and really, 14, and was really kind of bringing it back. People were like, oh my gosh, he's going to save Square Enix. And I was like, just wait till Final Fantasy 16. They're like, but 15's next. I go, he hasn't had that time to truly impact 15's development. I think some of it was, but wait till 16. 16 will be a real testament to his leadership and management style. And that's, I expect that. I expect to have a complete game. It doesn't mean it's going to be my favorite Final Fantasy. It doesn't mean I'm not going to, after the fact, say, you know what? Here's what I liked. Here's what I thought they could be better. How do I feel about the combat system being action? Like, I don't know. I'm going to go hands-on. I'm going to form my opinion that way. But it seems like a lot of people are looking for a reason to be mad. And I stated this a couple of weeks ago. I go, why does it feel like this is the best year we've had in gaming in a long time? And it's the worst year for just, people are just pissed about like anything. And so I do feel Final Fantasy 16 will have a review bomb scheduled due to its nature of its PS5 exclusivity, which, let's be honest, I was talking with Mike about this in the comment section, which we'll probably dive into some y'all's comments here in a bit. But I was like, honestly, I think one of the things that does, I will give a point to the game not being on like a PlayStation 4 is that Square Enix's reluctance to embrace or have a streaming option. I don't think the game should be coded for PS4, but we do know that you can stream games. And I think it would have been an interesting option to have. Hey, play it on PS4 with streaming. And that's a complaint you've heard me make numerous times with Square Enix's reluctance for GeForce Now, etc., because not everybody has a PS5. And so to sit here and say the pre-order
streaming, they don't like streaming their games. Nintendo
Blizzard has
Tears of the Kingdom locked down, even though it's out there circulating as an emulator. They're upset about they want to lock their IP down.
Yeah, Blizzard has terms that says like you can't like stream this, and they've never caught us, but it's like
I hear it runs well in GeForce Now.
I hear it runs great on Shadow PC. Like, I don't know, but it's like, so that's one of the things I see, happening with it. And then like Nevi Link saying, yeah, go play Octopath. Like for the Square, like I think the core
so good.
Octopath, Bravely Default. I think what I want to see from this, especially within Square, what I want to see with 16, whether they decide to make a 16-2 or whatever their path is forward, I hope that the next Final Fantasy numbered release isn't 5-6 years away. Because one of the things that I think that is a fair critique is that if this isn't your kind of thing that you're looking forward to, you love Final Fantasy, but you're just like, you know what? I really like the techno. I really like this. That gap in time between mainline Final Fantasies has gone so big that even if like in the past on the PlayStation 2, there was another one around the corner. In fact, you already knew of the next one when you were getting ready to buy the current one. You're like, okay, yeah, so even if this doesn't satisfy, I know that there's something right around the corner. And I hope that whether they take this engine and they like, yep, this is the future, this combat system is what we're gonna use and refine for the next couple of years, that we can see some more, fast-paced, releases, so that like people can kind of be excited about not necessarily an annual Final Fantasy, but I don't know. I think every 3 years would be really kind of cool, how that plays out. And now there's also rumors that we're going to hear about the next Final Fantasy 7, rebirth, kind of game, which will hopefully get people excited.
Remasters have been well received. It's you can do a lot of other things.
Those are so good.
So
Well, again, like Octopath Traveler bringing in Bravely Default, and so like, oh, you want a turn-based combat system? Here's that, that iteration in that path. Even Yoshi P saying like, you know what? If we do want to go back to kind of a pixeled Final Fantasy, like that'd be kind of neat. Like, yeah, like that would be kind of cool. I think people could be excited about that.
I think that's what the Octopath team was built for.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean. Octopath feels like a Final Fantasy game. It is a different name, but it feels like a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, so, some of the stuff is different within it, and honestly, I wouldn't mind if they decide to go and make a branded Final Fantasy, pixel 2D, like, but releasing it just like they did with the Pixel remasters. Like, hey, here's a new Final Fantasy telling the story. Turns out, by making those games that if people would purchase them, we can actually turn those out pretty regularly. It's like like the cost on doing that versus 17 would be substantial.
What's the gap between Octopath 1 and 2?
2 years.
That was fast.
Yeah,
that was fast. I was like, it didn't feel
even
long.
if I'm off by a year, like no more, it wasn't more than 3.
It felt fast.
Yeah, it felt fast
because I only play my Switch when I'm traveling, and I was like, I'm not done with the first one.
Yeah. Bring back tactics and bring back some of these things. Now the question and the hope is that they make sales. Now when I look at like some of the volume and conversation, because Yoshi P states publicly that Sony's helped out with development. If they tried to also release it on PC, the game would be another year or two away. Some of these statements do personally concern me because it makes me kind of wonder if like there's something really broken within Square Enix in terms of like recruiting and having the talent in the pool, and are they like spreading themselves too thin, or do they have the resources necessary? Because like, while we will get kickback that Sony is doing this, we know that Sony's writing a check, both in terms of their developers and whatnot. The question is does that check make up for the difference in people playing and people buying the game? Because what they're asking for people to do now, where we haven't had this in a while, or at least for a long time, is you're not going to be playing 16. You're going to have to avoid the internet and any reference of 16, like if you really cared about the story, which guess what? Final Fantasy fans generally, not 100%, but generally care about the story. The risk of you seeing like a short from a highlight of where like some kind of big moment happens where I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's a real risk there in the internet, and trying to avoid and keep this game spoiler free for a year. I could understand a week or two, like there's a reasonable amount of time. This becomes, I think, something kind of in a way I think a little bit unfair. What do you think?
Maybe. I think you don't know what you don't know. So like once you've had something revealed, like it has to be pretty explicit to get it right. A main character death in a trailer, something like that. But showing me a cloak sweep back on a face when I haven't played the game and I don't know what everybody's face looks like, and like, oh, that's this character, and so like you would have to have a much better memory than me to store that for the amount of time that I think it's going to go from all these Final Fantasy 16 clips being in my feed and thumbnails being in my feed to when I actually go hands-on with the game when it finally does come to PC or whatever. Now, if I go click on every single Ginger Prime video about Final Fantasy 16 and I study it, that's why we study for school. Like eventually I would retain the facts. I graduated school, but I didn't get there by glancing at things. I got there by reading it over and over and over and having flashcards. So if I watch 65 YouTube videos and I'm like, wow, the spoiler's really ingrained in my brain now. Yes, but that's the advantage of having the memory of a goldfish. Like people who have a better memory than me. The YouTube Shorts feed is incredibly dangerous. But I'm not personally worried about it. Like just for me, because I'm not going to put Final Fantasy 16 search terms in my algorithm. I'm not going to click on anything with Final Fantasy 16. So the algorithm is very quickly going to mute that for me, assuming I'm not interested.
Right.
And anything that does happen to come across, just like autoplay or something like that, I just won't retain it. There's just too much information that's trying to pass into here every day, and there's just not room.
Yeah. Now, Kraldev says it's also that you can't really join in or and have to avoid social conversations like with friends or work colleagues that are going to talk about the game and rave or complain about it depending on how it goes. It will be annoying for a while.
Yeah. My friends all love the Witcher series. So when a new Witcher comes out, my wife and I rotate what streaming service we're on. Anytime anything new comes out around the Witcher IP, on Netflix or a game or something like that, I don't always get to play it day and date because my wife and I are like, oh, we'll finish the series and then we'll turn on Netflix to kind of keep our budget in fix. And so like I've had to play our Xbox game night. I've had to just text me when you guys are done, guys, and I have to play Call of Duty with my friends on mute. Like I just pull the headphones off for like an hour while they talk about, and that part does suck. So if your friends are all into Final Fantasy 16, that's a different angle. 16 is not something that's going to be wildly pervasive across like my personal friend group, but there are things that are. John Wick movies, anything dealing with The Witcher, anything dealing with Star Wars, anything dealing with Lord of the Rings, those things get talked about day and date. And it's like, you really want to be watching that. If you want to take part in the conversation, you want to be watching it the moment it comes out. And so I understand that.
Do you think any of the 16 drama is built off of Forspoken's reception?
Anybody who wants to just take part and hasn't really gone back through like the years of things going into this and doesn't know who Yoshi P and all that, like, yeah, Square Enix just released an RPG. Wasn't it terrible? What was it called for something for awful? I don't know. And so like, yes, there's going to be like, because it's a real complaint. When I was in college, I went to Texas Tech, and there was a game where we were excited to beat our opponent, and we were leading at the end of the game with just seconds to spare. We took possession of the ball, and everybody assumed that meant we won. And so there was a great enough number of people that thought that an enormous number of fans climbed the walls and rushed the field. They then had to clear the field and issue a penalty to our team because the game wasn't over. And there was technically still a way for the opposing team to win. They did not end up winning. We did end up winning, and then we rushed the field again. But I was sitting up in the field going, what are they doing? The game's not over. And I was sitting there with your brother. We were college roommates. And we're like, what are they doing? And like, everybody's running by us. We won. And we're like, I don't think we did. Like, there's still a lot of time left. And so when I went to a bowl game at a friend's that I grew up with's college, I went there and I watched us play. One of his friends said, well, at least we don't rush the field before it's over. I can't say anything to that. Like, that's a fair criticism. So like to say like, oh, well, 16, didn't they make Forspoken? Didn't Forspoken like not land for everybody? Yeah. Like that's
I like Forspoken. I like Forspoken. I think and this goes back to kind of the price of it. Like at $40, I would buy Forspoken again. Easy. I don't regret paying $70. I was excited for it. I was like, oh, let's give it a shot. And then I played it and I beat it relatively quickly. I'm playing through the DLC. In fact, actually Square Enix reached out and they sent me the DLC because I just bought the base version. And I've been enjoying that playthrough with the DLC as well, and makes some changes. It does a couple of things that affect the core game, and like it's a fun game. Like, is it $70 worth? I wouldn't spend $70 on it. I'd say if you find it for $40, you're gonna enjoy it. Like, it's like there's some really cool things to enjoy about it, but there's also these. I feel sometimes these like hate campaigns and bandwagon campaigns, and I do feel like that is kind of what we're starting to see build up with the 16 online drama specifically. And I start to go, and this is just the conspiracy theorist in me. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Final Fantasy 16, in my mind, haven't played it yet. I feel like it's a game of the year contender. Like, I do have that belief. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right at all by any means. It's just kind of this
Who's
feeling.
running?
Tears of the Kingdom. 16.
People are saying Spider-Man's going to join them.
Spider-Man, and people say Starfield, as one of the things that they think has that. Which,
I still don't know what that game is.
Who knows? I have no freaking clue.
Is Best case, it's Fallout in space.
Fallout in space.
That doesn't sound like game of the year. It sounds like a game.
In chat saying RE4, I guess the remake there.
Oh yeah, that was well received.
Yeah, so it's like all in all, like, and there could be kind of a surprise hit out there or two, but that's just the general feeling that I've had. I've consumed.
So it's stiff competition. Like 16 could be a great game and not win game of the year. Like Tears of the Kingdom is amazing.
Correct. And so here's the conspiracy theorist to me though. Like, because Tears of the Kingdom is console exclusive, running at that beautiful 20 frames per second on the Switch.
Sold over 10 million copies in the first 3 days.
Hogwarts, baby. That's what chat. Like,
Breath of the Wild's at 31.5 million lifetime copies. I bet Tears of the Kingdom catches it.
Yeah, Octopath Traveler 2, maybe even. Like, we could probably do our own just show on, hey, let's guess game of the year.
Tears of the Kingdom will end the year in the top 50 games sold of all time.
So, well, it's a Nintendo game. I think there's an already inherent bias that is about it, and it is platform exclusive. 16 is platform exclusive, but I think that there's going to be this feeling that the gamers got robbed because, let's face it, Sony wrote a check, Square Enix cashed a check. I don't blame Square Enix for cashing a check. I wish that whole system didn't exist. But this isn't, I'm not in charge of the world. So I do have this feeling though that because of that, like we might see, it's just like people just being jerks about it. And a part of me would love to see like if it's deserving, if 16 comes out and we're all like, holy crap, that it would have that ability to be at least truthfully considered. I do have always the conspiratorial of like, it's Nintendo bias. You're stepping in, like you can't win if you're stepping in the ring against Nintendo, and that is what it is, right?
What's amazing about Tears of the Kingdom is that the emulators are running it better than it runs on the Switch,
Yes.
which means the devs built a better game than the platform it was going to be exclusive to,
Mm-hmm.
which just makes it more infuriating that it's going to remain platform exclusive for its entire life.
I have always been like anti-piracy, like in terms of it. Like I've talked about, like, no, if there is a way to hand the creator money for the product or thing that you want, I support that. I would still want to say, like, if you buy the game, buy the game, but then emulate it, because like Nintendo in this case is the roadblock to actively like having the better experience, and they don't like. I'm just like, could I hand you another $60 and it run beautifully? Like, give me the option, because I want to support you. But Nintendo with the Switch and how it is makes me very, very like, you better be releasing a Switch 2 next year, because this is getting ridiculous. Like, I get that it's printing money. Nintendo, but get out of the way. Like, get out of my way. I want to.
The majority of emulator players are not buying the game. Like, there's no way that's
right.
the majority.
You can't, because you can't enforce that. So, but Nintendo needs to, I think, get out of their own way and make the Switch 2 and deliver that, so that like if they make it to where it's like, oh, you bought the Switch Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, here's the Switch 2 Tears of the Kingdom. Those are two different games. Like, I wouldn't be shocked. Like, that would literally be the, like, yeah, that sounds right for Nintendo, But if they actually went and were like a real chat about it, like they'd say, hey, your digital purchases also run on the Switch and Switch 2, and it runs it better. Thank you very much. Like,
I'm not convinced they even have the tech to do that.
Nintendo.
They don't have a history of doing anything that nice, so I just assume that they're not even set up to handle it.
Mm. Oh man,
it's good. I played it for the first time over the weekend. It's really good.
It's a great game, dude.
So I hope people enjoy 16. It's gonna be a journey. I think it's gotten a little beyond what people could possibly know before it comes out. So there are people that are already ready to consider it game of the year. That's a little premature, but I understand why we need to have it being watched. But like the people who are already convinced it's basically one game of the year, that's a little soon. And to the people that think it's going to just flop, that's a little soon. Like, we'll get there. End of the month's coming soon, and then we'll find out how good of a game is it. It would have to be pretty good to be talked about as a platform exclusive. The advantage of being platform exclusive to Nintendo is that Nintendo reaches out well beyond gamers. So you can still become a social phenomenon, right? As opposed to PS5s are mostly sold to gamers, which means that the only people who are thinking about picking up the game or thinking about picking up the console are people who talk to gamers. Nintendo does something weird. When Wii Sports was doing really well, and all that, like my mom went out and bought a Wii that she heard about from a lady she sat next to on a plane.
Yeah, she's like, oh, that sounds fun.
Like you get to this point where you're now having evangelism. You're having this epidemic spread.
Media,
basically. It's not just gamers, which is good, because like I don't know that everybody has a close relationship that affects their purchase decisions with a gamer. And so that's going to be an uphill battle for 16. They're going to have to overcome that, as opposed to Zelda. Like, I have friends that don't play video games that they're like, I was thinking about getting a Switch and getting Zelda. I hear it's pretty good. Should I do that? Like, that's a wild question for them to call me, and like, they're not calling me and like, hey, can you tell me if I should like video games? They're calling me with an action plan. All I have to say is yes, and then they're going to go make a purchase.
Boom.
I'm just their final call, because like, you talk about video games a lot.
You really should emulate it.
So, like, if I say yes, they're going to go buy a Switch and Breath of the Wild today. Like, that's a wild phone call to receive.
Yeah.
And I have multiple friends that have done it. I just don't see how I'm going to have that same experience with 16. That some friend's going to call me in August and go,
You got to go buy a PS5 and 16. Right. It's a really interesting kind of question, because when it comes down to it, because like I went all in on getting the physical collector's edition. That was just like this, like, I've never done anything like this. Let's just be ridiculous. And so I purchased that because, like, I was like, it's got a really cool map. It's got the statue. I was like, cool. I could put like the map up here. I'm like, yeah, this will be fun. I'm gonna nerd out because I never have. I've always been like, what are we doing here?
I did it for Breath of the Wild. I bought the big physical because Zelda's one of those games. Like, Ocarina of Time is like my favorite game of all time. And Final Fantasy X basically like shaped my childhood. So yeah, I bought Breath of the Wild, big physical collectors, and I'm not unhappy about that decision. I did not do it with Tears of the Kingdom because I don't have time right now.
Yeah, time is always the limiting factor. The good thing is, like, for Father's Day, which is the week before, Julie's like, what do you want? I go, I just want some time to play 16, which comes out a couple days after. And she's like, you got it. I was like, perfect. So I'm going to be able to play and spend some time playing 16. My hope is to be able to sit down and truly beat the game before I have to go back to work on Monday. My fear is that, like, with life, things get busy. Life finds a way, and then it's like, oh man, I haven't had a chance to sit down and finish that game, and it's been so long that I forgot what happened last time. So I hope, if nothing else, they have, like, the feature that I want in every Final Fantasy game or any RPG is that whenever you come back to the game, it's like, previously, this is what's going on. And Dragon Quest 11 delivered that in spades. Like, just give me the rundown. Like, hey, by the way, okay, this is what just happened, and now we're gonna go talk to this guy. It's like, okay, cool. I'm ready to freaking rock and roll. But you think about it, like, if it wasn't for Fido, for Yimron, for Solemn, if it wasn't for those guys chipping in and working with you and getting me a PS5, all in, I'm looking at $900. Easily $900 to $1,000 for Final Fantasy 16. Right, like,
as opposed to my friends that did the Switch are also going to go ahead and pick up. They're like, hey, what game should I also get for my kids?
Right. What else?
And so it's a much more believable leap.
Yeah. Right. Well, and from a cost perspective, because even Switch, Tears of the Kingdom, a couple other games, you're $500-$600. Like, and for a PS5 and this $500-$600, the Switch is movable, right? Like, my PS5 is right down here,
the backseat on the road trip. Yep.
Right. It's right. It does functionally way more, less powerful, lots of power. Functionally, that's what it does, right?
But to convert a non-gamer, they're not expecting 4K 60 frames.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Like my friends that are not gamers that are playing Tears of the Kingdom, I've asked them, I was like, how does it run? They go, it runs fine. Like, every once in a while I get this weird little blip thing, but it's mostly fine. And like gamers, if it drops from like 60 frames to 59 frames and a boss fight has to be sampled from 4K down to 1080p, they're freaking raging. Like, we're just like, what the hell? And so like they're on the Switch having just an objectively worse performance experience than what we are. Mm-hmm. And they're totally fine. Yeah. Like, they had 3 Switches in the house, and I was hanging out with my niece and my nephew and my sister-in-law, and there was 2 copies of Tears of the Kingdom being played at the same time, and they were having a blast. Everybody was having a great time. They're like, look at this thing I built. I don't even know that my nephew is playing the game. Like, he's building his house, and he's like, I got a fish for my pond. It's like, he's just doing his own thing, man.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law's been playing the main quest, and she goes, wait, what? Like, she like looked up from what she was doing. She's like, fish for a pond.
Yeah.
Like,
so, like, as you and I kind of, as a general, like, I guess, foundational rule, starting point, really, because it flexes and it adjusts, right? Because I said that I beat, Forspoken in about, 20 hours, and I would pay $40 for the game. So I'm perfectly fine with Forspoken being a $2 an hour amount of fun, right? Like, but that's kind of the calculation. Usually $1 per amount of fun and joy that you're having. I'm already approaching that for Diablo 4, like, in terms of what I paid for it. Like, it is easily right on.
I bought the middle edition.
I bought the $100 edition.
I bought the 90.
I bought the $100 edition. I'm easily right now, like, I'm not at 100 hours, but right now easily right now tracking that. I was like,
Okay.
this is great. And I
What
could see
made you
this.
buy the 100 over the 90?
I'm a simp when it comes to like that stuff. I always like
Okay.
I panic and I'm like, I might okay, what, $10 more? Like maybe I'll want it. I don't know. it's like it's the
I didn't
same
see
reason,
anything in the 100 that
because
I
I generally
cared.
also don't spend money after the fact, right? So the other aspect of a game, I don't generally engage in microtransactions at all. I don't generally like go into the store and buy like what anything else. Like there are like rare exceptions. Like I bought the battle pass for New World Season 1. I don't know yet if I'll buy the battle pass for Season 2. I'm right around level 50. You know, July's on its way, right? You know, like life finds a way. And that's why I was like, if you don't let me keep it, I don't think I'm going to purchase it again. But that, and so it generally is like, this is just like, this is my maximum amount of money that I'm willing to commit to you. Here you go. You know, and so I just kind of put that up front rather than like, oh, just, you know, change it up. And so it's not a general 1-to-1 rule, but that's just kind of how I think about it. But you think about now, if that means true, and I say $1 per hour of fun for Final Fantasy 16, assuming that I had paid for the PS5, like at like 900,000, like that's a lot of hours to sink into one game. The only other game that I think I've sunk that much time into is Final Fantasy 14, but that was over the course of 13 years of time. And I hope to goodness I'm not, you know, like 16 isn't the one Final Fantasy that for the next 13 years is going to be the one thing to play. And we know that for a fact that won't be the case. But for $1 per amount of joy, I'm really excited for the physical stuff that I'm getting. But it will be interesting. How does that impact your like a review? How, because that's really what I feel is the anger around reviews. All the reviews are like, in their mind, somebody has a level of value. So like if it's not a 10 out of 10, I've wasted my $90 or something like that, that somebody that generally feels. What do you think about that?
I think the upfront cost is real, especially for the people that feel the pressure to buy a PS5 to do it,
Yeah.
because their cost is a lot higher. And then they're questioning, well, what other games can I get for PlayStation 5?
Mm-hmm.
You know, my two friends that bought a Switch explicitly to play a single Switch game also said, while I'm at it, I want to pick up a game to play with my kids, because I grew up playing video games and their friends all play video games. And I think it'd be really great to have something we could share. And so they weren't just buying the one game. It was going to be a big purchase and they were going to buy 2 or 3 games. And so they're immediately picking it up with something else. PlayStation 5, that's a harder thing for me to answer, because like I don't know what games kids play on PS5. I assume they're out there. I just don't know them, as opposed to like Mario Kart is a great choice for anybody to get. Mario Party's great. Smash is fun. There's just a lot of great, really easy to cover franchises that are super iconic. They get regularly updated. And so if all they ever do is buy anything with Mario in the name, anything with Zelda in the name, like you still have a complete Switch experience. I don't feel that way for like a casual gamer with PlayStation. You know, to us, we're friends with people that play God of War and play Witcher and play like all of these games. But my sister-in-law, when she beat Breath of the Wild and found out Tears of the Kingdom was that far out, she goes, what else can I play like it? And I recommended The Witcher. And she said it was way too intense, like from a mechanics standpoint.
Yeah.
She's just not that good at games and doesn't want to be. So like it wasn't a good fit. So, you know, it's been considered one of the greats, but it just wasn't a good fit for somebody that casual. So like when you're talking about a review, what is somebody's upfront cost? Are they going to be expected to buy a PlayStation and the game? And then what are they looking for? Because Final Fantasy fans are pretty diverse. The one thing we have in common is we all know we're going to get a story, whether we're the players that want or we're the players who don't care as much. We're all going to get one, but that's about it. This one's also M-rated. So for anybody that's been enjoying maybe the Pixel remasters, you've been wanting to play it, and maybe your kids have been watching you play it.
Yeah,
that's not going to be an option with 16.
That's not the case.
This is a hard ass.
This is Dad's Father's Day gift from wife and kids of go play this game that you're not going to play around the kids. And that's actually like the critique that I had with Forspoken. That's the critique like where I go, how is it that Gears of War figured this out and these two games like Forspoken didn't have it? Just give me the ability to censor the words and language, because the visuals of the game are gorgeous, but I don't want her like, because she's dropping F-bombs all the time. Like I don't need that. Just give me the option to turn that off. And then in 16's case, like, yeah, hopefully it would be cool if they gave you that option to sit here and say, you know what, I don't need the language because I would like to play it around the kids, etc. Because visually it'll be fine. Obviously, after I've played through the game, I should be able to kind of maybe put out a parent's guide of like, hey, generally speaking, 60% of this game easily play around the kids, no problems whatsoever. Here are the sections and timestamps of the things you might want to, like enjoy on your own time, and something of that nature. Because I think that's kind of an important. And Forspoken didn't give me that option, so I was like, from a parent, I was like, no, I wouldn't play this game around your kids. Like, and that makes me as a parent limited in my more play style and time. And so that just kind of, further kind of trickles down to, well, if I do have time to play a game and I can only play in this location of the house, therefore it's, like there's so many games that kind of just got cut, and Final Fantasy Pixel World Masters obviously is one of the key indicators of something bigger. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, or Chris or anybody, when it comes to the PlayStation exclusives, there have been like more of them have been both PS5, but also like playable on PS4. I don't know. Maybe there's just a handful that you can count that are only PS5. 16 is only PS5. And in terms of like volume of availability, I think the PS5 is what, up to 60 million units?
It's a lot.
Yeah. So you do have
it's not as many as the Switch, but it's a lot. It's some big number.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, because it hasn't been out that long.
Right.
But for the first like several years of its release, that was based on literally manufacturing capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever number it is, it was the number they could ship. And so it's just now starting to be like, hey, you go into the store and they're sitting there. So I don't know what the total number is. And like M-rated doesn't mean it can't sell.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm
we're
actually
talking about
happy
number
that
of
it's
units sold
M-rated,
here.
right?
Grand Theft Auto 5 is like the second greatest number of sales of all time, but it's not platform exclusive.
I'm excited as a like a fan of Final Fantasy who's grown up with this franchise. Like, I'm excited to see them have that. I'm excited to see them take this road with the combat system, because yes, like David says, Final Fantasy fans who aren't buying 16 and do own a PS5 because it's not turn-based. And what I say is like, I want them to have the freedom to change and to evolve and not to be like limited by games that came before. This is the same thing where I got frustrated at the Halo fan base, where they were like, no, it's got to go back to like Halo 1, Halo 2 roots. Otherwise it's going to fail. And it's like, well, okay, did it? Like, it's like, I'm like, guys, like you have it. You don't understand the demand. Like the world has changed, just because like you have a good fond memory of how something was, 10, 20 years ago.
But to
doesn't mean that
the other angle,
yeah,
if you're going to change too much, right? This is one of the arguments against Ring of Power. I personally enjoyed Ring of Power, but like me saying that somewhere my brothers both just perked up and said something awful was just said in the world. Like, they're both just immediately angry. They're going to have a terrible day. I'm sorry,
text
guys.
Messages
they're
are
not just going to
blowing
be
up.
so mad because I enjoyed it. But to their credit, like, if you're going to change the universe that much, why are you using the IP? Like, the beauty of Octopath Traveler is it's not a Final Fantasy game. As somebody that's enjoyed Final Fantasy games, I think it's a great recommendation that I also enjoyed Octopath Traveler games. And like, I think that there's a lot of overlap there, but they very explicitly did not name it Final Fantasy Traveler. And they could have.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They could have changed a little bit of the branding throughout the game, and it could have easily been a Final Fantasy game. Swap some names, swap some places, and it would have been a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been a huge rebrand to get it there, but they didn't. So if you are going to change it a lot, I can understand why people are frustrated. So as a general rule, it would be nice if that was something that's more cohesive. That's not what Final Fantasy has done as an IP. Final Fantasy is not always turn-based. So that's just something that goes back. So they haven't delineated that, right? And that makes it very frustrating as a consumer, where these days, like, what's pushed into our feed is entirely based off these search algorithms. And so like, things are better done. If you have 10 different packages, you should release them as 10 different products. It's kind of how these search algorithms have started functioning. And so it's how we're processing things. So for Final Fantasy to come out and me to go, hey, I liked a Final Fantasy product. Would you also, it's like, oh, I like this ham sandwich. And it's like, great. You're really going to love this salad that I put in a blender. It's like, why?
No.
Why? And so like, it's really frustrating I understand the frustration that it's not turn-based.
Yeah.
And as you noted earlier, there's not another one right around the corner. And so if you're somebody who wants to play at least one Final Fantasy game every decade, there are alarm bells going off when this one comes out and it's not a turn-based, because you're like, I don't know if we get another one before 2030.
Right. Maybe I don't have the dexterity to actually play an action combat game. I think that's where the timeless.
I get it.
I hope that that's where the timeless artifacts make it
upset about, like, to the degree that I'm seeing. I understand where the frustration comes from at your personal level. I don't know why I'm seeing the level of hate that I'm seeing on Twitter.
I think a lot of it then is being hijacked by the console, but the console wars, because all of a sudden this is a game that any story of didn't mean sales expectations, pre-orders are down. It's like the answer is just like, what the hell? Like, you're not on Xbox or PC. Of course that was the thing. So that all stems to a truth of what the hell's going on with the bean counters over at Square Enix, going like, because every story of every game they released didn't meet sales expectations. And that story for 16, even if it's like game of the year game, that story, no matter what, people are like, I didn't play it. This is the reason. See, it's a garbage game, etc. And people are like, no, it's actually an incredible game. But Square Enix is clearly delusional about what, how many actually are going to sell. And so I just wonder, because in the other corner, I've seen usually from Yoshi P going, oh, wow, we didn't really expect that this was going to sell this well. Sorry about that. New servers next week. It's like, okay, like that's been my experience with Square Enix for the last 13 years. When you only kind of focus in on one franchise, the 14, version of this, and then everything else is like, didn't meet sales expectations. I would be just generally curious. What was your goal, right? Like, is it that bad? And then why are we even releasing that story? It's like, all right, Square, you're becoming a meme now at this point. Like, oh, it turns out sold 100 million units. Damn it. Can you even be happy for yourself, Square? Come on.
I don't know.
Barbosa says, I think the negativity X game is bad because the reason why existed pre-Twitter. It's just now up in center because of social media. So these ideas and conversations have always existed, but they're just brought more into your face about it, as opposed to just being kind of living.
And they can spread, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have one negative friend that convinces you and all your friends to be negative on a game. It stops there. But now you and those friends can go out online and you can infect other groups with whatever line of thought. I would hope that some of the positive thinking would be just as contagious.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's actually true. But I would hope that would be just as contagious. I think Tears of the Kingdom has proven to be contagious.
Well, if you're too positive about it, you've been bought and paid for, right? So it's like, oh, Brian's really excited. Like the number of times that someone's like, how much did they pay you to say these lies? I'm like, no checks are showing up, dude. In fact, like, if they did show up, I would have to tell you about them, because that would be illegal. Like, for me, I guess, being that we've been doing content creation for so long, like, it's just a natural thing that it's like, if somebody's paying you to say something, you're required to tell people that you're being paid to say the thing. And it's like, people are just like, oh, you bought and paid for it. This game isn't a 9. It's clearly a 4. Like, based off of what scale, you weirdo? Jim Jones says, I've seen people on Twitter refuse to buy 16 because the Square Enix president made a statement doubling down on NFTs a while back. Twitter's going to do what Twitter does. Do you think NFTs has any impact on here's the thing we can't test, though. Let's say that's true. How many of those people secretly just double down on that? Like, oh, game's good. Let me just that public statement of like, I'm not buying this game. And, I'm just gonna buy
Creative Business Unit 3 has a very negative stance on NFTs. So if there's going to be an NFTA project out of Square Enix, Yoshi P is not your guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just as far as like, if you want it to succeed, you would like a developer that's really passionate about it and is ready to tell you how great they're going to do with it.
Ooh, mm-hmm.
Shoving it down Yoshi P's throat is not going to result in a good product. So he's also kind of the golden goose right now. So if he says no to something, at least until he stops being a golden goose, he probably gets his way.
Pretty much.
So I don't think 16 or 14 is where NFTs show up. I think it's much more likely that they show up in another studio when that happens.
Yeah, if that happens, that they can launch those games, because Symbiogenesis or whatever the hell was supposed to be coming out this spring, and they opened up a Discord for it. I'm in that Discord, and it's like dead quiet. Like there's nothing happening with that right now. Maybe I don't know how NFT games work. Who knows? Now, Captain Tyler says, we also have to remember that a lot of people don't consider Final Fantasy 14 a true Final Fantasy because it's an MMO, and many fans have no experience or trust in Yoshi P and the team. A lot of people probably have no idea who Creative Business Unit 3 is.
Sure.
I agree with that.
You have to be a pretty deep fan of a publisher to be aware that there are teams within that publisher. Blizzard has teams. So when people are all ripping on Blizzard, we rip on it as a collective. But I think World of Warcraft is under, I think it's called like Team 2. They're all super generic names. So that's the other thing, is it's hard to get super excited because they don't want to spin them up as game developers. But they are on teams. And so I want to say World of Warcraft is Team 2. But they're all like super vague. They're just like numbered or something like that. And these teams exist. And so like you have to be a pretty devout fan. Like I went to a hockey game with a friend a while back, and he was telling me how excited he was for the like assistant defensive coordinator, because what this meant for his career, because he was here. It's like, how much do you know about a sports team that you're aware of like the assistant defensive like coordinator and like where they coached before this? Like that just takes a really devout fan. To the generalized person, they're going to see the name on the door, and that's where they're going to stop. They're going to go Final Fantasy. Cool. I think I've heard that name. Oh, Square Enix. I feel like I've heard that name before.
Yeah.
And that's where it's going to stop. So that is a fair point. And like that, ideally, that's something that just comes out when the game comes out. They're like, hey, why is this good? And then all the people who are aware can go, oh, because Creative Business Unit 3 has been crushing it for a while.
They've been crushing it. One of the things that I find interesting, though, is that when we talk about the time between Final Fantasy games, like if you look at 14, in that kind of horizontal way of like 14, Heaven's Word, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Endwalker, like they're the only one making an actual Final Fantasy game. If you take every expansion like a Final Fantasy game, but it just stacks on each other, right? They're the only ones who are making Final Fantasy games every 2 years. And like then in between that, you have 15, and then it's like, oh, let's take another 6 years. Now here's 16. So I think that's essentially going to be really interesting to see 16. And I think that a big part of this, like a big part of maybe kind of a building that trust process in for the non-MMO players, is that Square Enix does need to follow up 16 with with something significant, something to look forward to, but only when they're within like 2 years of actually releasing the game. Because I don't think one of the things that has really hurt Square Enix's reputation personally is 10-year projects that like never seem to like come together until like the 11th hour, and then you're like, okay,
you can't do 10-year projects anymore.
You can't.
Can you imagine designing a game for today in 2013? I'm aware I'm just saying the current year minus 10, but it sounds like a long time ago.
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago. Yeah.
Some crap has hit the fan since then.
Yeah, and Mandrake is making kind of a point regarding like the non-MMO players, though. But like if for the MMO players, if it wasn't for like that relationship, maybe 16 wouldn't be a game that we actually went and were excited about. Like if you were like, oh, I'm like I came from World of Warcraft. I've never played a Final Fantasy game, and now I'm playing Final Fantasy 14. Oh, the team behind this is also making 16. Is it an MMO? It's not an MMO. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Maybe I'll give it a shot, based off of that experience. So hopefully that ends up kind of, evening itself out.
What'll hurt them is if they found Final Fantasy 14 through other MMOs.
Yeah.
They probably didn't come from a PS5 based MMO to Final Fantasy. And so now you're limiting yourself to that group of people that also own PS5s.
Mm-hmm.
Because this thought you just described, it would be pretty bold to say, I like Final Fantasy 14. Oh, they're making a single player game on a console I don't own. Like that represents a lot more disposable income than, I think everybody has. There are some people that have it, and that's great, but that's not universal.
Yeah. It says that they're willing to bet that 80% of the people refusing to buy 16 for whatever reason on Twitter will be playing it day one, assuming that those people are also PS5 owners, because it is asking a bigger ask.
Cross-platform, man. Just picture if your Final Fantasy 14 launcher just had 16 for sale right there. You could just buy it right there and boot it up from right there. Every time I boot up WoW, I've been aware of the current state of Diablo 4 pre-orders because it's on my launcher
every day.
And so like there are people who won't buy Diablo 4. But a lot of those people are either because they don't like that type of game, or it's because they have an issue with Blizzard, in which case they don't have the launcher anyway. So you're advertising. So it's home field advantage to be able to advertise on your launcher. And be able to buy from right inside the launcher. It knew my credit card information. It asked for the confirmation code and the expiration date. And so I put those in, and then I bought it, and then it downloaded it, and I could have booted up World of Warcraft while I waited. Like, that's a process that Square Enix just doesn't have. And it just, so maybe there's like PS5 Final Fantasy 14 players that have that experience, but that's not the majority of the Final Fantasy 14 players who choose to dip a toe into 16.
Yeah. So, one kind of final comment before we wrap up for the day, Earth Demon talking about it's different making a single player game versus an expansion because you get a ton of already created resources, both assets, code, and you can't have that in single player. At the same time, though, you also don't run into the risk of decisions that were made 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that you're like, well, I would want to do this, but we don't have that flexibility, etc. But yes, single player games versus the multiplayer, I think, are way more complex to balance, to maintain, and to develop for as well. But the ideal in this case is that, whether they do this or not, you take 16. If people are really happy with it and the combat's fun and people want more, you take, hey, we've got the engine, we got the combat, let's refine that and use that as kind of a base and say, hey, 2 years, 3 years from now, here's 17. And we don't have to redefine all these things. We don't we can do certain things within it that make it different and stand out, but we don't have to necessarily start from ground zero every single time. And that would be my hope, that what we see with the future of Final Fantasy as a single player mainline, game. And then at some point have Yoshi P make another MMO, because I know he said that he's wanted to do that. And I think that would be kind of really cool to see what that take would be on, But again, now we're talking about designing.
Picture him in his house, like Steven Sharif style, like just chatting with us. He keeps it closer to the best than that.
Oh, much, much closer. And that will be interesting to see what happens with Ashes, because that game is, I really want them to win. Like I do. It looks on paper awesome.
Relentless transparency has been their entire marketing strategy.
Relentless.
And it's what we've asked for as gamers. Now we get to find out, why has nobody else been doing it?
Why does anybody do this?
Because if it works, that'll become the norm.
Yeah. Oh, this is how you do it.
If it doesn't work, devs are going to go, yeah, that's why I was keeping my mouth shut before.
The whole time. Well, when they were doing the Anthem stuff, the guy comes out and is like, we're going to be real transparent about our process, and etc.
Sounds nice.
Sounds great. And I was like, I said that sounds like a huge risk. I was like, I think people are going to be like, oh wow, we get to see how the mud's made. Like, that's okay. Like, it's interesting for 2 people, and then everybody else is getting mad. It's like, no, we're gonna try to argue over balance numbers in
those belong at conventions. That's the place to put those. Conventions. You have a dev panel. Everybody that doesn't care is out eating from food trucks, and to the people that care, they can sit there and ask their questions.
Yeah. All right, Chris, has Diablo 4 finished downloading for you?
Oh yeah.
He's ready to go. Guys, hang out. Chris is going to be doing some Diablo this week. We've got lots of stuff planned as we get into the news of, this is the Summer Game Fest. This is used to be E3. Now that has been replaced. So it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and broadcast. Keep Chris live over on Twitch. And then for those of you, we'll be back. I'm planning for the next show Friday, so we can get some hands-on Diablo impressions from Chris for this week, as well as any other developments that kind of break out, as I'm assuming we're going to hear some really exciting news about New World, Throne of Liberty, Blue Protocol, and so many other things. All right, guys, ending broadcast. Waving it out.